Mm. Well, because okay. Mm. Mm.
Boy, everyone in this country's always running around yammering about their fucking rights. I have a right, you have no right, we have a right, they don't have a right. Folks, I hate to spoil your fun, but there's no such thing as rights, okay? They're imaginary. We made them up, like the boogeyman, the Three Little Pigs, Pinocchio, Mother Goose, shit like that. Rights are an idea. They're just imaginary. They're a cute idea, cute, but that's all, cute and fictional. But if you think you do have rights, let me ask you this: where do they come from? People say, well, they come from God. They're God-given rights. Oh, fuck, here we go again. Here we go again. The God excuse, the last refuge of a man with no answers and no argument. It came from God. Anything we can't describe must have come from God. Personally, folks, I believe that if your rights came from God, He would have given you the right to some food every day, and He would have given you the right to a roof over your head. God would have been looking out for you. He would have been worried about making sure you have a gun so you get drunk on Sunday night and kill your girlfriend's parents. But let's say it's true. Let's say God gave us these rights. Why would He give us a certain number of rights? The Bill of Rights of this country has 10 stipulations, okay? 10 rights. And apparently God was doing sloppy work that week because we've had to amend the Bill of Rights an additional 17 times. So God forgot a couple of things like slavery. Just fucking slipped his mind. But let's say God gave us the original 10. He gave the British 13. The British Bill of Rights has 13 stipulations. The Germans have 29. The Belgians have 25. The Swedish have only 6. And some people in the world have no rights at all. What kind of a fucking goddamn God-given deal is that? No rights at all? Why would God give different people in different countries different numbers of different rights? Boredom? Amusement? Bad arithmetic? Do we find out at long last, after all this time, that God is weak in math skills? Doesn't sound like divine planning to me. Sounds more like human planning. Sounds more like one group trying to control another group. In other words, business as usual in America. Now, if you think you do have rights, one last assignment for you. Next time you're at the computer, get on the internet, go to Wikipedia. When you get to Wikipedia, in the search field for Wikipedia, I want you to type in Japanese Americans 1942, and you'll find out all about your precious fucking rights, okay? All right. You know about it. You know about it. Yeah. In 1942, there were 110,000 Japanese American citizens and good standing, law abiding people who were thrown into internment camps simply because their parents were born in the wrong country. That's all they did wrong. They had no right to a lawyer, no right to a fair trial, no right to a jury of their peers, no right to due process of any kind. The only right they had, right this way, into the internment camps. Just when these American citizens needed their rights the most, their government took them away. And rights aren't rights if someone can take them away. They're privileges. That's all we've ever had in this country is a bill of temporary privileges. And if you read the news even badly, you know that every year the list gets shorter and shorter and shorter. Sooner or later, the people in this country are going to realize the government does not give a fuck about them. Government doesn't care about you or your children or your rights or your welfare or your safety. It simply doesn't give a fuck about you. It's interested in its own power. That's the only thing, keeping it and expanding it wherever possible. Personally, when it comes to rights, I think one of two things is true. I think either we have unlimited rights or we have no rights at all. It's called the American dream because you have to be
Oh no.
As the Ontario government works to transform social services here in the province, OW and ODSP recipients say they weren't consulted, and they're concerned that these changes will create gaps and further vulnerabilities. The Ontario government says their goal is to create more stability in people's lives so they can get back into the workforce. But those on Ontario Works and Ontario Disability Support Programs say these changes can't be made without raising rates, investing in supports, and addressing individual barriers.
They're trying to frame it like this is all great and we're going to get people into jobs and so forth. But what they don't acknowledge is that many people on ODSP are not able to work. But the government doesn't seem to want to acknowledge or address that fact.
Bailey So, who is on Ontario Works and other social assistance recipients, say the province's plan leaves out their voices and individual experiences.
It really didn't help the people. Without consulting us, it will have these intended consequences. So the plan will not work.
The province is proposing a number of changes. One expert says, though the vision has some positive elements, there would be challenges in the execution.
It's a really high stakes transformation.
Under the province's life-stabilizing framework, municipalities would deliver a number of supports working towards more people exiting to employment and shorter stays on assistance. Advocates and recipients want the province to ensure that the service is not a requirement to qualify for benefits.
These services aren't readily available. The wait lists for affordable housing, for mental health services are extremely long. And I don't know that there's any change that's going to happen to make municipalities better able to provide those services. There doesn't seem to be funding attached to expand access to those services.
The province says the new vision will help to address barriers faced by recipients. Quote, in March, the ministry began an extensive 12 to 18-month co-design process where we will engage with municipal service managers, staff, bargaining agents, and our clients as we work together with municipalities to design the improved system. This includes work on a funding approach that reinvests any administrative savings to enhance the system. The Daily Bread Food Bank says 65% of their clients are on social assistance and living in poverty, a key factor the government should consider.
There's no recognition that income is actually the foundation to life stabilization. And the province has not put it on the table that they're at all open to discussing raising social assistance rates.
In 2018, the Ford government approved a 1.5% increase. B, who is on OW, gets $733 a month, while Trevor receives $1,169 on ODSP. Both say they're often forced to choose between life essentials, paying bills or food.
The rates have been frozen since 2018, and clearly since 2018, prices have increased. The government does not want to address the fact that benefit rates, remain 50 to 60% below the poverty line.
B says she's been on Toronto's affordable housing waitlist for 7 years. Recently, her landlord sold the home where she was renting a room. Securing a new place has been impossible.
I'm in the state of homelessness. You can say that.
In Toronto, I'm Faiza Amin for City News. Talking healthcare.
Aaron O'Toole, his instincts, his values are not aligned with helping vulnerable Canadians.
Government accountability.
Mr. Trudeau has a problem with entitlement. Right from the beginning, he thinks being Prime Minister is about himself.
And the crisis in Afghanistan.
Maybe the fact that Justin Trudeau called an election might have impacted his ability to plan for the evacuation of our allies.
Canada's party leaders attacked each other Sunday as they bounced from issue to issue to close out week 1 of the campaign. Jagmeet Singh kicked off the day in Toronto to pay tribute to NDP leader Jack Layton on the 10th anniversary of his death. Layton led the party to a historic result in the 2011 election.
I didn't really believe that politicians can make a difference. And my friends pointed to Jack and said, well, what about Jack? Don't you think he's someone that makes a difference? And I got to be honest, I was pretty cynical, but Jack was able to overcome the cynic in me.
But there was still plenty of cynicism on the campaign trails. At a stop in New Brunswick, Liberal leader Justin Trudeau brought up past comments made by his Conservative counterpart about a 2-tier healthcare system.
Aaron O'Toole, in the pandemic, came out clearly in favor of a private, for-profit healthcare system for Canada. Shame on you.
Oh, fuck. Why does anyone give a shit?
And finally, new rule: Apple needs to think different about our privacy. Apple, the company that made it possible for men to show their women their dicks from thousands of miles away, is releasing an update that will allow them to hack into your phone without your consent, to snoop through all your pictures just in case you're a pedophile. Or as Matt Gaetz put it, I'm switching to Samsung. Now, let me be clear. I'm against pedophilia. That's why I joined QAnon. But nosing through everybody's private photo stash is casting an awfully wide, intrusive net. It's like if the company that sold you a safe said, oh, and we're going to stop by sometimes when you're not home to make sure you're not keeping naked pictures of kids in it. Our phones should be like our wallets or purses, private. What about probable cause? What about the Fourth Amendment? This is the very definition of unreasonable search and seizure, which can and will be abused to find evidence of other illegal stuff on our phones. In my case, drugs. Now, again, I think child pornography is bad, and I don't care who knows it. But it's also not a trump card you can pull out that makes all our other rights disappear. Thank you. And I don't see a very strong fight brewing against this blatant constitutional breach. And I think it's because we're so dependent on smartphones now that we will let them do anything to us. Apple should admit that the problem with their phones
isn't just what people might store on them, it's the phones themselves. Today's phones make people assholes, full stop. And I know whenever someone starts in on how evil smartphones are, there's always a pat answer coming back about how people have always freaked out about the latest technology corrupting young minds. Come on, they said it about radio and the telephone and TV. Yeah, it sounds like that argument might be right, but it's not. It's not. Not if you think about it for 2 seconds. I don't remember lugging a TV under my covers so I could watch Huckleberry Hound until the screen asked me, "Are you still watching?" I looked forward to seeing I Dream of Jeannie once a week, but it didn't throw off my circadian rhythm. I liked McHale's Navy. I wasn't addicted to it. I didn't watch it when I drove. Radio to TV was a difference in degree. Smartphones are a difference in kind. Less like TV or radio, more like a pacemaker. You know, something you can't live without. No other device has ever commanded our constant attention the way the smartphone does. Of course, when I was a teenager, I had a Princess phone.
Oh my god.
I'm Glenn McGinnis, and this is Outburst. On this program, do you want a federal election right now?
Absolutely. We need to make some big changes in our federal government.
No, I'm not ready for election because there's no choice. You know, they're all the same.
I'm kind of undecided at this point.
Emotions are raw, and having kind of a gauge of where the population is, I think that would be a good thing.
Talk of an early federal election has been going on for a while now, and Canadians will be voting across the country on September 20th. But a lot has changed since Canadians last went to the polls in 2019. Our circumstance has shifted dramatically due to a global pandemic. The latest this election could have been held would be October 16th, 2023, more than 2 years from now. So we set out across the country to ask Canadians if the timing is right for a federal vote. Our question:
Do you want a federal election right now?
Not right now. I think people have had enough of everything. People just need to get back to a little bit of normal. And I don't think we need to put signs everywhere.
Absolutely. We need to make some big changes in our federal government.
I'm not sure that the result is going to be that different to what we have now. It might be a minority government on the other side. I don't think you're going to get a huge majority either way.
I would say with the way Canada's moving right now, especially during the pandemic, the way things have been dealt with,
I do believe there's a change to be made. I don't think Canada was ready for the pandemic at all, and the fact that it's taken this long for us to get this many people vaccinated, obviously there's a little lack of leadership there.
I haven't put any thought into it. I don't feel the need for, like, I personally, I'm not, like, don't feel that I need to vote for a new party right now.
No. Why?
I don't know. I just don't feel like it's the right time. I know that sounds. We're just coming out of a pandemic, and anyone wants to deal with it.
No, I would not. No, it's like paying for branding over and over. No, we're tired. We could use a break from lots of things. That's one.
It's just not the time to spend money on politics. It's time to spend money on the pandemic, on the Indigenous problems, on straightening out the country.
Personally, I don't think we really need one, but, it's a democratic issue, democratic right, so we sort of have to exercise that every 4 years or so, and it sure beats the alternative of non-democratic and dictatorship and military government, that type of thing. So, it has to happen. Whether I want or not, it's going to happen.
Not really.
And why is that?
Because we're just out of a mess. Let's take a deep breath and just enjoy the way it is now. And I think the government, whoever was leading it, has done a good job provincially, federally. Let's just enjoy the next few months and quietly take care of ourselves and our families.
I think it's too early. We're still in the midst of this. I mean, we think we're over, but I'm very concerned about the Delta variant in the U.S. especially, and that's spreading here.
I'm kind of undecided at this point. Just like I'm not sure where I would vote exactly. I'm not unhappy where things are at right now. So to me, I'm unsure if we need a federal election at this point.
A federal election now, I'm fine, honestly. I always vote every election I'm eligible to, but I'm almost burnt out. Up in Nanaimo, we had a ton recently, like 4 or 5 in a row there. Yeah, I think things are okay right now, personally.
I don't think Canada's ready for it right now. We've got to get another year over this COVID stuff, and then probably be more positioned to do it a year down the road than we are right now, or even 18 months down the road. Don't want Trudeau in that long, but I think it'd be better for everybody if we get the course going first before we actually sail the ship.
No. Billions of dollars have been spent for COVID relief in many different forms, and I think that a federal election is just an added cost to an already struggling economic country, like the economics of this country. Simple as that.
Yes and no. I am very unhappy with the Conservative leadership, federal leadership. I would like to see them step it up a little bit and be more proactive. So in that sense, as a Conservative, I don't think I would like an election. However, I think the people of Canada need to voice their opinion and voice their vote. So it's a yes and no answer.
It would depend on what the need will be for, but I think if there's some serious concerns that needs to be addressed, then yes, a federal election would be appropriate at this time.
No, I don't think it's an opportune time to do that. As I say, we have a lot of housekeeping matters in this country that need to be straightened away, and to embark on an election that is more about who's spending as much money as the other one, or digging up dirt. I don't think we need that right now. I think we need a kinder, gentler place. What Canadians are noted for.
I don't think it matters. I think that I'm not sure what the motivation behind calling an election was, but if calling an election allows for whatever government becomes the government to feel more secure in their position to make the decisions that they want to have in place and the policies they want to have in place, then perhaps it is time.
Yeah, I think any time that we can get people's opinions out there, it's good. Democracy works well when it's checked often. So I think absolutely having a federal election right now in the wake of the pandemic too, right? There's people's opinions on local or federal government have changed. And I think emotions are raw, and having kind of a gauge of where the population is, I think that would be a good thing.
I think
with a minority government, there's a lot of things that aren't getting passed that should be fixed. The speediness of things getting fixed and legislation changing, I mean, it isn't as fast as it should be. So, of course, in an election, if it can make changes that are faster and better for the Canadian people, then why not? Yeah, I have nothing against it.
The COVID and everything else, you don't want it to push your luck. I think it should be more like late fall or next spring. Maybe best time. But I would like to see the government go as far as possible. Try to work together instead. Try and these stupid infighting and stuff like that is just dumb. Just work together and get things done.
For each and every political party, those who are chosen to lead it become the face voters attach to the brand. During elections, political party leaders travel the country putting forth their ideas to Canadians. And those who lead in opposition hold the governing parties accountable for their policies and decisions. So, as Canadians prepare to make up their minds, what are your impressions on those who lead the parties you may be voting for? Our question: how satisfied are you with our federal party leaders?
Not very satisfied at all. I think they're absolutely docile. As my wife said, important issues like First Nations, housing for people who can't get a housing market. There's nothing happening. It's just sailing along without any action at all to support people that need it, to be honest. Not very happy at all.
I could never be a politician, so I do have a lot of respect for what they do and how they do it, but I do think there are things that could be done better, and I think that there are things that can be changed.
Scared the crap out of me.
But I think that you also get that with every party.
Very unsatisfied with Justin Trudeau. I think he's not done. I think he's not been the person he showed he was going to be. I'm also very unsatisfied with the Conservative leader. So unsatisfied I can't remember his name at the moment. But I don't think he is doing the job that
So unsatisfied I can't remember
which
his
is
name.
really offering an opposite viewpoint to what the Liberals offer.
I guess I would say I'm disappointed in a lot of the topics that they bring up that I don't think are relevant. I would rather they just stick to the basics. Let's deal with the problems that we have. Let's not bring in social issues that Canadians have already decided on. We've got our social agenda set, and I think we should stick to that. Let's deal with the ongoing issues, the Indigenous problems we have, the economy.
I would say I'm very dissatisfied with the current crop of federal leaders. I think we absolutely can do better. I think they're interested in showmanship far more than they are in producing anything of substance. I think the critiques that they produce are rather ineffective and focused on winning, news appeal and much less on actually saying anything. I'm convinced that, sure, they know how to do things behind the scenes, but I'm concerned by the fact that that's not what they choose to project.
Not very satisfied. Again, I think that our political machine has gotten to such a level that they cater to the interests that get them elected, and their main interest is not necessarily altruistic in the best thing for the country, but how do we get reelected?
I'm very unsatisfied with Justin Trudeau because I think he's an actor. I think he's very disingenuous. I think he is severely underqualified for the job that's ahead of him and that's been in his control. Very, very disappointed with what's happened in this country.
Our present government, I think they've handled themselves very well considering the pandemic. Could they have notified the country earlier? We had information as a country. My understanding from what I hear from our government and others, that information was there and we could have gotten out of the gate a little sooner and perhaps shortened the stay, but who knows? But I think that they're doing quite a remarkable job at this point. Criticism, there's always going to be critics, and you can't be all things to all people.
Not satisfied at all. I think there's a lack of action around a number of topics, right? From everything from First Nations to the economy. There's just, Trudeau's been in power for how long, and we're not seeing really a lot done.
I'm sort of satisfied with them. I mean, you could have other people in there and you can criticize them, but they're doing their best. And,
They're doing their best.
you know, we need them.
While they're fucking raking
I
the
don't know
dough.
how you're going to put it any different. It's going to be any better.
I'm getting less and less satisfied. I was quite satisfied at the beginning, optimism and sort of a vision. Now
Yeah.
I'm less satisfied with that.
Not satisfied. One, Trudeau, I think, has messed up the whole COVID response. He's also bankrupted the country. And I don't know much enough about the other one. He's just sort of non-existent.
I'd say I'm about 75% satisfied. They got us through this COVID thing. They sort of seem to work together there. Other than that, I think they're doing a good job.
Oh, I am definitely not satisfied. We watch how they give out money to all these other countries to help everybody else. But who's helping our own people, especially us seniors, especially the veterans out there? We're all living on barely anything.
I think they're doing okay. It's a tough year, and I think they've done the best job that they can. It's not perfect, but it was a strange situation, and everybody was kind of figuring everything out on the fly, whether it be federally or provincially. I think that everybody did the best they could. So that was the main focus of everybody, and they did a pretty good job. I'm okay. I'm okay with what they did.
When was the first woman elected to the House of Commons? 1867, 1921, 1958. 1867, 1921, 1958.
I would say probably, it's hard, but 58.
68.
1958.
I would say 1958 too. 1958.
I'm going to say 21. 1921?
I'm just going to guess 1958.
1958.
I would have said 58.
1921, perhaps? You are absolutely correct, sir. Oh, very good. All right. Elbow bump there.
The 1921 election was the first where some women could run to be MPs themselves. That year, 4 women ran for office, but only one was victorious. Agnes MacPhail became the first woman elected to the House of Commons as Progressive MP for Grey Southeast, Ontario. Although she faced opposition from traditionalists and her own party, MacPhail remained in office until 1940.
The needs of voters across the country and what they find important will vary depending on what region you're talking about. While COVID-19 has taken up much of the focus over the last 17 months or so, things like unemployment, healthcare, or the economy, just to name a few, remain high on the priority list for many Canadians. So once again, we set out across the country to ask Canadians what topics will they be thinking about when they cast their votes at the ballot box. Our question:
What issues will decide your vote?
That's a great question, because I think that the promises in the federal budget are issues that are important to me. Long-term care, but not just building more warehouse buildings. More creative long-term care. Certainly the child care that was promised, pharmacare that was promised.
That's a big thing for me is environmental, which I feel like is, you know, all of young people's main concern, sustainability. Obviously, like social issues like affordability. I know that the economy is like a rank thing to control, right? But especially for like my generation right now, like for example, in Regina, like the housing market is pretty good.
With infrastructure, schools, mostly infrastructure. I'm an iron worker, so like you want, you know, the highways better, and you know, relieve some traffic in the area and things like that. You know, like we can build all these high rises here, but the more we build up, the more we're going to need to build our streets and we're going to need to build our highways better, because there's a lot of people coming to Kelowna. We're going to need to release some of that congestion. So that's what I would go with.
People on the town
economy, but of course there's a lot of social justice issues and things as well that also parties, you can't get that stuff wrong. You have to get it right because people are as we age and culture changes, people understand what they did wrong in the past, and you got to get that stuff right now.
I think it's going to be tricky because the federal debt is running really high, and there's no miracle in it. You can still keep spending to support a number of initiatives, which are all good. However, how are we going to work our way out of it, That's a big unknown.
Canada needs to pivot to better energy sources. And I think I get the impression that some people are, and I see why, but we're stuck in sort of a toxic cycle of resources and depleting them. So, yeah, that's to me the biggest thing.
What issues would obviously environment. It's becoming more and more an important and crucial topic. Has been ignored for some years. The genocide that has happened to First Nations, Indigenous peoples of this country, that's our original sin. We need to really act on that, and with immediacy and honesty and clarity.
Funding for the arts, especially for young people, really young people, like children and teenagers and stuff like that, more venues and stuff like that can help them. Just resources to help teach people who are underprivileged and stuff like that. That kind of stuff would make a big difference for me and who I would vote for.
Indigenous issue, how they're going to resolve that, how they're going to bring Canadians together on that issue. And I guess what's going to happen, how are we going to pay for COVID? How's that going to impact our taxes for the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years? Yeah.
It seems pretty obvious to me that the environment and our relationship to the Indigenous people has to be sort of everything going forward.
I don't know. I think this time around it's probably going to be environment, COVID recovery. Those are probably the two biggest ones right now.
Federally, I think they're just going to do what they want to do. I'm more of a provincial guy, and I'm more concerned about what they do as a province as compared to federally. I mean, to me, federally flows money to the province. That's the only thing I get out of the federal government. I don't look at the federal government for anything else.
Well, being a senior, obviously, issues concerning seniors would be, I'm always up that sort of information. I guess like everything else, it's, the economy, global warming, the whole, breadth of issues, but they all play a part.
Homelessness would be a big thing. I mean, there's so many homeless people here now. It's terrible since the pandemic. And people just on assistance, they can't afford, you know what I mean? They only give you $5.35 a month. And yeah, homelessness would be a big thing.
How to help the country out of the pandemic well without creating billions more in debt?
I'm pretty simple. The main thing I want to see change is the first past the post system. Though I don't think that's one that's likely to change anytime soon, sadly.
It doesn't seem like much happens here. The pipeline was a big deal, but we still got all kinds of educational problems, medical aid problems, homeless problems, things like that, which by all appearances, they're just problems and everybody sort of goes by and, Is that what we want?
Federal politics may not be everyone's cup of tea, and that's become obvious in past years with low voter turnout during previous federal elections. Voter apathy could also be attributed to dissatisfaction with government or with politicians in general. Another reason could be that some Canadians are simply not informed enough about the issues. So we set out across the country to ask Canadians what could help make them more engaged. Our question:
what would make you more interested in Canadian politics?
That's a good question, because growing up, I haven't been really interested in politics as much, but I think if they really engage the younger population, the Gen Z, the millennials, in a way that makes politics more attractive, I think that would be a way to get
You're like 12.
more.
You can't even run.
protesting? No. You simply take the power back. In this conversation from my podcast, Under the Skin, on Luminary, available on Apple, Khan Ross, former British government employee who was so disgusted with the government that he turned into an anarchist, explains how the principles and systems of anarchy can be applied to provide us with an alternative way of running our own systems, running our own lives, rather than living within structures that can never change because they themselves require the structures to remain permanent. Have a listen.
You don't agree with sort of municipal, public owned or what nationalised ownership of railways and things like that?
Not by the state, no.
Not by the state.
I don't believe in state ownership, no. I believe in local ownership and communal control and full democratic control of institutions and utilities like railways or banks or whatever. Maybe a centralised government could start us on the way to that, but they couldn't complete the task. Absolutely not.
But it could be transitional in the same way that socialism transitional to.
I don't hear that in the Labour Party's current.
No, nor do I.
I don't hear them talking about a transitional programme.
I mean, you're right, because it's in there. But like, how could, you know, I say we, the people, us, could we stand to say, look, we want to stand in this election, and what we propose is after this, we decentralise power wherever possible.
Well, there are political parties that do that. I mean, there is one in Denmark that's proposing that. The alternatives.
Always the bloody Scandinavians, isn't it? What is it? The air, the pornography?
It's proportional representation, to be precise, allows it in Scandinavia. A first past the post system is obviously militates particularly against small parties. But in that circumstance, and indeed, frankly, in all capitalist societies, I think the idea of getting elected to make changes is a naive one. I think we have to create change ourselves. I don't think we take over Tesco's, we create an alternative Tesco's. I believe not in overthrowing structures particularly violently, because I think that is a kind of change that justifies reaction and legitimizes the reaction. I believe in constructive alternative systems that are better, that attend to people's needs. And I think, you know, we're very much stuck in a culture of protest and voting, and methods will give us the society we want. The only thing that will give us the society we want is constructing things, institutions, processes, forums, companies, changing the nature of the company itself. Our social relations, from the micro to the macro, is constructing that ourselves, and that takes work. And in Occupy, I saw, you know, ability to come to the square and protest. It was a much, much smaller group of people who took the time to go away and spend literally years trying to construct something that would endure. So it's work.
Yes, it's work, isn't it? It's curious because sort of polarity suggests an integral relation to the other which you're trying to overthrow. You know, like if you're involved in the kind of, you're connected to it. You can't break it with a protest movement. That's fascinating.
Well, you legitimize it, actually. I think protest legitimizes the thing it protests against. It says that you are meaningful, you matter, when in fact actually there's, you know, these institutions that are iniquitous, exploitative, dominant, socially domineering need to be just ignored, because whilst we create it, they will dissolve away, they will evaporate, because we've created something that is so much more and human and just better. And that is a model of change in our current circumstances. It doesn't require you to go out in the streets and throw yourself under tank tracks. It doesn't require you to throw Molotov cocktails. It doesn't require you to vote for somebody who, you know, might or might not deliver the change you wish to see. It requires something else, actually just a pragmatic cooperation with colleagues who share the same ambition to build something. And that's really fun. I mean, it's actually really satisfying to try and build something new. It's difficult, you know, and you'll fail. You may fail 100 times. It may take us 1,000 ships to launch. We may need to launch 1,000 ships for one of them to get through. But if that one gets through, then we can succeed.
That Occupy movement was like that bloody punk gig that Morrissey and New Order and everything was at. You know, like it's sort of like it was like this moment, Occupy, that seems to have spawned a great many thinkers, theorists, activists, ideologists. Its ripples are very much felt, I think, today.
So it's a wave of something. It was a real cry out that things are not right. And in America, where I was living at the time, it made inequality a political topic. That is of extraordinary importance. You know, that even Obama couldn't talk about inequality until
protesting isn't enough, and voting don't change nothing. If it did, they'd ban it. We need to protect and create new systems. When I spoke to the great Satish Kumar, the legendary author, activist, protester, who met Martin Luther King, met Bertrand Russell, walked around the world without a penny in his pocket to help the peace movement, a pilgrimage of learning. I spoke to him on my podcast, Under the Skin, available on Luminary. You can get it on Apple. We talked in depth about how the protest movement needs to change, the problems around the social justice movement and its impediments, how we can create a different world if we engage ourselves as individuals and create new collectives. Have a look at this video. You are going to love it. If you're someone who wants to change the world, who sees the problems in this world and wants things differently, you should watch this video.
With some of these examples of great people that you have cited over the course of our conversation, some of whom I know you have met and communicate with intimately, have you noticed that in some of the most prominent, vocal, public, visible aspects of, I would say, the leftist activist movement, there is a tendency towards iconoclasm and the destruction of some of these heroic figures, or if not destruction, the dismantling, deconstruction, including Mahatma Gandhi, certainly John Lennon, certainly Picasso, even Mother Teresa, where there's a sort of a focus on but they did this, but Mahatma Gandhi, John Lennon did this, a kind of tendency to deconstruct and I would say sort of annihilate the positive aspects of some of these great icons of counterculture and of activism in order to achieve a sort of it seems to me to be a kind of an unattainable new Puritanism.
No, I think that's a mistaken view of the so-called radical left. Because people you have cited and I have cited, I have met, like Martin Luther King, I met, and he was a great activist, and he was not a wishy-washy, flaky person. So, what is good in these sort of examples, Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, and people of that nature? They have not just protested and spoken against something. They protest, of course. Mahatma Gandhi protested against colonialism and imperialism. Martin Luther King protested against racialism. But protesting is only one way, but not the complete way. After protesting, at the same time, while we are protesting, during that time, we also need to protect what is good in society. So we have to protect biodiversity. We have to protect traditional indigenous wisdom and indigenous cultures. We have to protect our rainforest. We have to protect beauty. We have to protect spirituality. So protecting was the great work of people like Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King and all the people of that nature who have fought against injustice, social injustice, environmental injustice. But also at the same time, they have also protected the just order and the local economies and local communities and many good things. So protecting beauty and goodness and truth is as important as protesting against the unjust order. And the third thing they did, which lots of these left-wing intellectuals forget, that they built alternatives. They didn't say no to wrong things like racialism and imperialism and colonialism and industrialism. They also said yes to positive things, new things. They built new communities, new schools, new colleges. I started Schumacher College, so create a new alternative education. And a new way of industry, new way of Mahatma Gandhi started a spinning wheel and new architecture. So building new alternative to show that what is something which can be without pollution, without waste, without treachery, without exploitation, without inequality, you can create a better society. So setting those examples. If you put these three things together, protest, protect, and build, then it's a complete and holistic movement. But just the political...
Hi there, welcome to the show. Still taking place, but for the last time in this blank void.
God, that feels great to hear.
Yeah.
This must be how England felt when they got rid of you.
Excuse me, they didn't get rid of me. I chose to leave.
Chose, okay. Sure, let's go with that.
Yeah.
Has anyone ever asked you to come back? Like anyone?
Yeah, that's a fair point. Anyway, it's been a busy week. There was a bomb threat in Washington. This smirking golf bag was demoted from hosting Jeopardy to merely running it. And Mark Zuckerberg unveiled his latest innovation.
Workrooms is used on Facebook's Oculus Quest 2 virtual reality headsets. This is my first virtual reality interview. How about you?
Mine too. My first virtual reality interview too.
Well, that's the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Do you like Zoom meetings? No? Well, this is like that, except you get to wear a helmet and your co-workers are glitchy Sims. It's another game-changing hit from the guy who brought you. Everyone you went to high school with is QAnon now. But instead of focusing on that, let's dive straight in with our main story tonight, Afghanistan. America's war there is drawing to a close after almost 20 years of fighting. We all knew the end was likely to be ugly. The only question was, how ugly? Well, this week, we got our answer.
Afghans are thronging to Kabul's airport.
This is what desperation looks like.
We now know that at least one of the American transports took off with a payload far in excess of the maximum recommended.
800 people on your jet? Holy cow. I mean, good job getting off the ground.
Holy shit! That is terrifying. You never ever want to be on a plane that is managing to actively impress air traffic control. Although I will say that is the exact reaction I want every time I do a single push-up. Holy cow, I mean, good job getting off the ground. No one could have expected anything more from you. And the thing is, that is just the people that managed to get onto the plane. There were horrific videos that we are not going to show you of people clinging to the wheels of a plane and falling to their death as it took off. Well, Biden insisted that we planned for every contingency. That is pretty hard to believe, given just 10 days ago, the US was desperately trying to negotiate with the Taliban, asking it to spare our embassy in Kabul. A day later, that embassy was told to destroy sensitive files, and by this time last week, we were evacuating it altogether. Although the Secretary of State pushed back on the idea that the embassy was closed at all.
So if no American is in the embassy, we've essentially closed the embassy. It sounds like you don't want to say that.
No, we're going to have we're going to have our core diplomatic presence, and in effect, an embassy at a location at the airport.
Wow, that is a rough sentence, because we'll have, in effect, an embassy. It's already pretty alarming. Then you finish it off with at a location at the airport. Perhaps the darkest qualifier in the English language, because to state the obvious here, an embassy does not belong in an airport because it's not a fucking Wolfgang Puck restaurant. And the fact is, America has now joined a long line of countries who came to Afghanistan to serve their own interests, only to leave defeated. It's a pattern so universally known. It was literally a plot point in Rambo 3.
This is Afghanistan. Alexander the Great tried to conquer this country. Then Genghis Khan, then the British. Now Russia. Ancient enemy, make prayer about these people. It says, may God deliver us from the venom of the cobra, teeth of the tiger, and the vengeance of the Afghan. Understand what this means? That you guys don't take any shit. Yes. Something like this.
Yeah, something like it. Although, it feels like old Rambo could have used a few more follow-ups there. You understand what this means, right? Yeah, you guys don't take any shit. Sure, but also that our political system has long been defined by other countries' imperial self-interest. You understand what that means? No, I don't. Yeah, I didn't think so. You know what? I'm guessing we'll be seeing you guys in roughly 15 years. And look, clearly, we don't have time to recap the last 20 years of America's involvement in Afghanistan, much less reckon with all the long-term consequences. But we thought tonight, in the wake of the chaos this week, it'd be worth trying to answer a few basic questions. Why were we in Afghanistan in the first place? What did we do while we were there? And what are we doing right now? And let's start with why we were there. Because on Monday, Biden offered this origin story.
I went to Afghanistan almost 20 years ago with clear goals. Get those who attacked us on September 11th, 2001, and make sure Al-Qaeda could not use Afghanistan as a base from which to attack us again. Our mission in Afghanistan was never supposed to have been nation building.
Oh, okay then. If our mission was never nation building, then I guess not mission, not accomplished. But the thing is, that's a little true, but also a lot not.
Because yes, the primary reason for initially invading Afghanistan was 9/11, the fact that the Taliban had been giving safe haven to bin Laden. But very quickly, that mission became dressed up in the language of nation building and human rights. George W. Bush said rooting out the Taliban was important, but building a school is equally important. And Biden himself said back then, the alternative to nation building is chaos. And there was lots of focus at the time on atrocities the Taliban had committed during their 5 years of repressive rule, the subjugation of women, the executions in the soccer stadium, the destruction of the famous Buddhas of Bamiyan, all of which were terrible, but which had been equally terrible before September 11th, and we hadn't done much about it. The truth is, between a post-9/11 desire for vengeance and the Bush administration framing intervention as a crusade for human rights, they built a near universal political consensus. Only one member of Congress, Representative Barbara Lee, voted against the authorization of military force. Other Democrats jumped to co-sign the human rights argument, like Representative Carolyn Maloney, who delivered a speech on the floor of the House about the need to combat Taliban repressions, featuring a striking visual aid.
I salute the Bush administration for balancing war with compassion, for dropping food as well as bombs. Even in war, we are showing a regard for human life and human rights that the Taliban will never know.
Okay, first, it doesn't get much more than a month after 9/11 than a white Democrat in a fuck you burqa saluting the Bush administration's commitment to human rights. And the problem there is, you could be revealing the solution for world hunger, but if you are a white lady who threw on a burqa for the drama, you want to cancel each other out. And we dropped a lot of the second. Over 71,000 Afghan and Pakistani civilians are estimated to have died as a direct result of this war, with many more injured or displaced. As for our program of drone strikes, they didn't just kill civilians, they traumatized an entire generation.
The villagers call them planes without men. Shahzaman says his 9-year-old son Suleiman was killed by a drone 3 months ago, along with the fathers of all of these children.
I'm scared they'll bomb us. They killed my father, and I'm afraid they'll bomb us too.
I can't walk outside my home because I'm scared, and we've been scared at home.
Yeah, it's terrible. So if Carolyn Maloney wants to illustrate all the major threats Afghan society's faced in recent years, she may want to deliver her next speech dressed like a fucking drone. And those strikes are just one part of the answer to our second question, which is, what exactly did we do in Afghanistan? Because the US came in with big plans, promising to set up a modern, centralized democracy. And yet, instead of engaging with and understanding the country's complex local political powers, we adopted a policy of paying off and co-opting local warlords and drug traffickers, which eroded trust quickly between the Afghan people and the blatantly corrupt government that we helped fuel. By 2006, in the words of one retired colonel, the government had self-organized into a kleptocracy under which people in power could plunder the economy without restraint. And yet, successive administrations kept giving us rosy assessments like this.
The Taliban have been driven from power, Al-Qaeda had been driven from its camps, and Afghanistan is free. That's why I say we have made remarkable progress.
The war in Afghanistan is ending. Al-Qaeda's been decimated. Osama bin Laden is dead. We have made real progress.
We'll make a lot of progress in Afghanistan, and with time, we'll have it spinning like a top.
Oh, you will you? But you know what? I guess he is technically right there. We did leave Afghanistan spinning like a top. You know, those things that famously spin forever and never collapse. The fact is, things obviously weren't going as well as all three of those men publicly claimed, as we now know, not least thanks to this revelation 2 years ago.
According to more than 2,000 pages of documents obtained by the Washington Post, military commanders, diplomats, and aid workers privately and in blunt terms describe an unclear mission, a failed strategy, and efforts to sway public opinion. Among the revelations, retired General Douglas Lute, the Afghan war czar under Presidents Bush and Obama, saying in 2015, "What are we trying to do here? We didn't have the foggiest notion of what we were undertaking."
Wow. That sounds less like something you'd expect to hear from a general, and more like the internal monologue for Sir Ian McKellen in this photo from the set of Cats. What are we trying to do here? Has anyone got a plan for what this is going to look like in the end? I have the foggiest notion of what we're undertaking. Those interviews were collected by SIGAR, the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction, a government office tasked with producing honest reports about how things were really going there. One of which noted the US government's goals were often operationally impractical or conceptually incoherent. SIGAR's mandate was to promote efficiency and prevent waste, fraud, and abuse. And I know focusing on wasteful spending may seem like the absolute least of the issues here, but sometimes knowing exactly where the money was spent helps you understand the scale of the mess we've left behind, because so much money went to military contractors to set up projects with no plan for how they'd survive after we were gone. Here is the head of SIGAR identifying one expenditure in particular.
I think the worst case so far of just stupid waste has been the purchase of the helicopters and the airplanes for the Afghan air wing. It's clearly risking that those planes and those helicopters are just going to end up on the tarmac rusting. They can't even use the planes they currently have. Over 70% of the maintenance is being done by U.S. contractors, not by the Afghans. They don't have the pilots, they don't have the ground crews, they don't have the workers to So why are we repair. buying them? That's a good question.
Yeah, it is. That clip is from 7 years ago, but it's not like since then we've fixed the underlying problem. Last month, defense officials were maintaining that aircraft could still be used after we were gone because Afghans could simply service them with US contractors looking over their shoulders via Zoom or coaching them over the phone, which is so close to nothing. I'm honestly surprised the US didn't just buy every Afghan technician a masterclass subscription and tell them that Anna Wintour's course would supercharge their creativity. And that is just emblematic of our behavior in Afghanistan. We came in, built something on the American model, almost wholly dependent on American support, and put next to no effort into ensuring that it was sustainable after we left. Take the government itself. Foreign grants finance around 75% of its public spending, meaning that as the Taliban takes over, that money presumably dries up and the economy is now poised to collapse. And it's not just the economy that's in danger here. There were real, meaningful gains, particularly for women who had suffered terribly under the previous Taliban regime. Millions of girls were allowed to attend school for the first time, and women joined the military, the police, and held political office. But those achievements are in real jeopardy now. And some who led the way, like Mahbouba Siraj, an Afghan women's activist, are acutely aware of that fact.
I'm going to say to the whole world, shame on you. Are you using all of us? Are we being just the pawns in your hands? Is that what it is? I don't understand it. They just made decisions with their gut feelings or whatever. All of these men of the world that they are in power, and they're destroying something that we worked so hard for. What is happening in Afghanistan today is going to put this country 200 years back.
That is incredibly hard to hear. And the thing is, she's right. The people of Afghanistan have been treated like pawns. While there were gains, the initial impulse that led to them was purely US interests. And for 20 years, for multiple reasons, the US and various Afghan governments did not secure those gains. And even though this week has brought incredible scenes of Afghan women leading protests against the incoming Taliban regime, odds are much of that progress is now set to be obliterated. But here is where it gets really hard. What was the answer here? To stay indefinitely? It is very hard to make a good case for that, especially given the Taliban have been strengthening in recent years and have made it clear that they were going to escalate violence unless we left, which most people agree we had to do. The problem is, though, just as we went in, focused entirely on US interests, we are leaving the exact same way. And that brings us to what we're doing right now. Because this exit was set in motion in February of 2020, when the Trump administration struck a deal with the Taliban for a total US withdrawal by May of this year. In exchange, the Taliban agreed not to let Afghanistan become a haven for terrorists and to start peace talks with the Afghan government. Although notably, that deal excluded the Afghan government, making this line from Mike Pompeo a little hard to take.
When it comes down to it, the future of Afghanistan is for Afghans to determine. The US-Taliban deal creates the conditions for Afghans to do just that.
Well, hold on there, Mikey. Because you never want two people in a room determining your future without you, especially if one of them is the fucking Taliban. How does Pompeo expect the Afghan people to react to that? Congratulations, Afghans. Today is the first day of what someone else determines the rest of your life will be. Now, Biden pushed our exit date back slightly to August 31st, but he basically followed through with the Trump administration deal. And while the Taliban largely stuck by their promise not to attack US personnel, almost immediately after signing that deal, they carried out at least 76 attacks across 24 Afghan provinces and have since pursued assassination campaigns of government officials, journalists, and civil society actors, and just this May, beheaded an Afghan interpreter for the US Army. And yet, all the while, they've made a big show of presenting themselves in a more modern, flattering light, something that continued this week.
This was a smarter, more media-savvy Taliban senior leaders claiming they want to form an inclusive Islamic government. The group is establishing a civilian casualty prevention and complaints commission, tweeting out WhatsApp phone numbers for Afghans to send in complaints.
Wow, that is something. And set aside the fact that Taliban Complaints Department sounds like a sketch Elon Musk pitched to SNL, I'm not sure it's going to be all that effective. It's the equivalent of instituting a complaint box in Scott Rudin's office. The problem with the behavior there isn't lack of awareness. A significantly changed Taliban just doesn't seem likely here. Their ties to Al-Qaeda only appear to be deepening, and they're now even better armed. The Afghan forces fell so quickly, they left behind brand new boxes of guns and grenade launchers, which Taliban fighters have been filming themselves opening in the world's grimmest.
Complete picture, obviously, of where every article of defense materials has gone, but certainly a fair amount of it has fallen into the hands of the Taliban. And obviously, we don't have a sense that they are going to readily hand it over to us at the airport.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty safe assumption. But hey, we can always text the Taliban complaint department and see what happens. I'm sure we'll be dealt with swiftly. So here we are, 20 years of war and destruction, tens of thousands of Afghans killed, many more traumatized, and the overall sense that you have at this point is of deep betrayal. Betrayal of the promises that were made to the Afghan people, and betrayal of the US service members asked to execute those self-serving promises, and who are now left asking themselves, what did I just do? What was this all for? The military sent out an email to 9 million veterans this week, offering a list of mental health resources with notes like, if you're having thoughts of suicide, call this number. And if you are, do. This is a grim situation, and there are immediate decisions that need to be made that have life or death consequences for Afghans who put their trust in us, like this activist.
Fatima, that's not her real name, and her children have gone into hiding after death threats from the Taliban for her work in empowering other women. She thought she was building a new and better Afghanistan, but now she's viewed as a spy and enemy collaborator.
I feel extremely abandoned. I'm in danger. It's not only that I am in danger, now my kids are in danger. They won't leave us. They won't leave me alive.
We bear responsibility for the position that she's in. We said we'd protect people who did courageous things that pissed off the Taliban, like advocate for human rights, even if it wound up putting a target on their back. And now it feels like we're walking away going, oh, cool target, how'd you get that? You know what, don't answer, we're fucking leaving. And again, I am not advocating for staying at all. What I am saying is, we're in the midst of a massive humanitarian crisis, and we have a clear obligation to take in Afghans who are now vulnerable, and not just those that worked with US troops, but those like Fatima and her children whose lives are now at grave risk. Although some conservative commentators are already trying to get way out ahead of that.
If history is any guide, and it's always a guide, we will see many refugees from Afghanistan resettle in our country in coming months, probably in your neighborhood. And over the next decade, that number may swell to the millions. So first we invade, and then we're invaded.
The lesson of this 20-year war cannot be that every time we turn a country upside down or make huge mistakes, our immigration laws, our refugee laws no longer apply.
Okay, first, fuck off, you tag team racial panic goblins. Second, the notion of every time we turn a country upside down is an incredible thing to just blow past. Maybe that's the lesson here, Laura. Maybe don't keep turning countries upside down in the first place. As for our refugee laws no longer apply, we are a big part of why those people are refugees. Helping them now isn't charity, it's doing the bare minimum. Refusing to help a neighbour whose home just burned down is shitty. Doing it when you help start the fire is fucking monstrous. And the thing is, they are not the only ones who've been blithe about the fate of the Afghans. Biden's failure to plan here is astonishing. But his continued indifference to the lives of anyone who's not American isn't really surprising. He's felt this way for years. According to the late diplomat Richard Holbrooke's diary, in 2010, the two men had a conversation, and Biden told him the US had to withdraw every troop from Afghanistan, regardless of the consequences for women or anyone else. And when Holbrooke asked him about American obligations to those who'd be in danger if we left, Biden mentioned the US withdrawal from Southeast Asia in 1973, saying, "Fuck that. We don't have to worry about that. We did it in Vietnam. Nixon and Kissinger got away with it." And may I just say, Joe, A-plus choice of historical role models there. When you're rolling with Dick and the Kiss, you know you're rolling on the right side of history. And last February, Biden doubled down on that argument.
Don't you bear some responsibility for the outcome if the Taliban ends up back in control and women end up losing the rights?
No, I don't. Do I bear responsibility? Zero responsibility. The responsibility I have is to protect America's national self-interest and not put our women and men in harm's way to try to solve every single problem in the world by use of force. That's my responsibility as president.
Okay, real quick. You don't have to make a zero with your fingers to indicate you mean zero. You're an adult man, not a child ensemble member of Broadway's Matilda. God will say, if Biden wants to argue for isolationism going forward, he is welcome to do that. But what he can't do is use that as a justification to dismiss the fates of people in whose country we've already disastrously intervened. Because we have a non-zero duty at this point to do everything we can to help them. And that means getting as many people out as we can. And advocates for refugees say that the first thing to do here is secure a perimeter at the Kabul airport, making sure that people have a safe way to get there and to get inside, because that has been total chaos this week, to the point that many of the departing flights have left with empty seats. And the fact that there are people with visas unable to get onto the planes is bad enough, but there are many more at-risk Afghans who are without visas or who are still stuck in the process, and we should be getting them to the US as quickly as possible so they can then safely finish their paperwork here. And that can be achieved by granting them categorical humanitarian parole. And to the extent that any hesitation about doing this is due to fear of political blowback thanks to idiots like these, call your representatives and tell them that you care about this. Because if they think that you don't, it is not going to happen. Look, the chaos this week is already a stain on Biden's legacy. The only question is, how big does he want that stain to be? And that is really up to him. But more broadly, we as a country need to take a hard look at what we've done in Afghanistan, which is likely to be destabilized for decades to come. So, what can we do about that? Not much now. No amount of brute force or perseverance is going to clear up the clusterfuck that we helped fuck into existence. And I realize that's a quintessentially un-American idea. To acknowledge that we can't always control something that we want to control or achieve something that we want to achieve. But the truth is, we can't. I know that feels futile, but assuming that we can go into another country and fix everything by simply imposing our will is largely what led us to where we are right now. We've spent decades claiming that we're trying to solve the world's problems, albeit almost exclusively when it helped to solve our own. And the result has been, in the words of this professional pearl clutcher, that we've turned one country after another upside down. So we should maybe stop doing that. But in the meantime, the very least we could do is help alleviate the humanitarian crisis ahead, because no matter what happens in Afghanistan from here on out, there is absolutely no universe where America bears zero responsibility. And now, this.
And now, Tamron Hall will have you know she is 50.
And here she is, the one, the only, the 50 and fabulous Tamron Hall.
I have in my 40s now that I'm 50. I'm 50 now. On a personal note, I'm 50 and I'm 50. I love that you said you're 41 and you don't care. Wait until you turn 50 as I did last week. Now I'm 50 and she's 50. I'm 50, you're 54.
Hello, you know, you and your friends on Sesame Street have been helping kids and families around the world in all kinds of ways for more than
50 years. 50 years? That's how old I am. Emma's only 3.5. Listen, I am, as the kids say, I'm 50. How did I go 50 years? Chef Treaty did not know that. I'm 50 years old. I've dated a lot. Okay, I am 50 years old. I am 50. I'm 50. I'm 50. So this is the best taco I've ever had in my life. I am 50.
Moving on. Before we go, a quick word about hammers. Some are easy, some are chonkos. Some have a little claw on the end for pulling nails, others have a little round knob and no one knows why. And one hammer is actually a practicing personal injury attorney, which you might remember from this And Now segment that we aired in 2019.
Greedy insurance companies play dirty. Bring it on. I'm Jim Adler, the Texas Hammer. I'm Jim Adler, the Texas Hammer. I do my best to bring them down. I get angrier than a junkyard dog. I stand tough and carry a big ham. I growl and bark. It's hammer time. I'm Jim Adler, the Texas Hammer.
You get the idea, right? He's the Texas Hammer. He carries a hammer. He talks about hammers. For one in the middle there, he talks about growling and barking like a dog, which is a bit confusing because that's not a thing that hammers do. But then it's right back to hammer time, baby. Now, we aired that because we thought his ads were fantastic. But since then, we've discovered just how much money Jim Adler puts into them. He claims to have spent over $100 million on ads since 2000. And as you can see from this testimonial that he once filmed for an ad agency that he worked with, he puts a lot of thought into them too.
A lawyer in another state may not want to be a hammer or be a tough, smart lawyer, but they understand the image that the client wants to portray.
Right. Lawyers in other states might not want to be tough, smart lawyers. Wisconsin likes its lawyers weak and simple. Michigan prefers them lean and lethargic. Idaho wants every attorney to be damp and distracted, while here in New York, we like them sweaty and suspended. Unfortunately for Jim Adler, though, it turns out that there is another lawyer in another state who wants to be a hammer, too.
I'm Mike Slocum, the Alabama Hammer. If you've been injured, call me right now and get the big check.
Hi, Mike. Nice to meet you. Now, if you are noticing any similarities there, you're not alone, because when Jim Adler found out what Mike Slocum was doing, he fucking sued him. And while we can't get into all the claims in his very fun lawsuit, basically he's alleging that Mike Slocum, the Alabama Hammer, had adopted his famous persona in a brazen bid to confuse and deceive consumers. And the thing is, he's not just claiming the Alabama Hammer is copying his nickname. I'm going to play two of their commercials side by side and see if they look at all similar to you.
Greedy insurance companies play dirty. Bring it on. Cheap insurance companies play rough. I beat them at their own game. I'm Jim Adler, the Texas Hammer. I'm Mike Slocum, the Alabama Hammer. That's what I thought.
Oh, come on. No, I have to tell you, Slocum denies Adler's claims, including that he copied that ad. And I'm going to say, good luck defending that argument. But I do actually have a bit of sympathy for Mike Slocum here, because if you watch his ads that aren't hammer-themed, it becomes clear just how much Mike needs that gimmick, because they're a total mess. There's one where he's a big bucks hunter, where he shoots deer that explode into money, and there's one where he runs after an ambulance like a carousel horse, only to get hit by a different ambulance, and then there is this.
Give me my lunch money back. Where's Alabama Hammer?
I've been standing up to bullies my whole life. Woo! Woo! I'm Mike Slocum, the Alabama Hammer. If you've been injured in a car wreck, don't let the insurance company bully you. Call me right now.
What the fuck was that? I'm really curious what happened in the next scene when the police turned up. Who punched this child unconscious? That was me, officer, but don't worry, it's okay. Explain how, but just so you know, I'm going to get my taser out while you talk. Oh, when I knocked him out, I was also a child. Then I said, woo! Immediately aged 30 years into an adult and said, woo! Again. It seems unlikely, but you are white, so I'm going to go ahead and give you the benefit of the doubt. Look, it seems pretty clear to me that Mike Slocum ripped off the Texas Hammer, and you can see why. His commercials are everything that Slocum's aren't. Clear, precise, and thematically resonant. You'll learn two key facts about him. He's the Texas Hammer, and that is it. And I so badly don't want these two glorious maniacs to fight. It seems the best thing is for Mike Slocum to simply get a different Tool Themes nickname so these two dangerously strange men can move on in peace. And I actually have a suggestion for you, Mike, and it's this: banana slicer. Mike, the Alabama banana slicer Slocum. Think about it. It works perfectly. Just like a hammer, it's a tool, and like your commercials, it's unnecessarily complicated, and I don't like looking at it. So please, Mike, take this idea and take this banana slicer too. Just give us an address and tell us where to send it. And that is it. That's our show. Thank you so much for watching during this very weird time. Thank you to our staff for working incredibly hard in a very difficult environment. We will be off for a couple of weeks now, but we will be back September 12th, definitely in a studio, maybe with an audience, maybe not, who knows. But the point is, that's it.
That's it?
Yep.
Like, you're ending it?
Yep, that's it. This is where you and I say goodbye.
You know, it is our last night together, right?
Right.
So, you didn't plan anything? Conan got a song, remember? Jack Black sang a big song.
Right. Yeah, sorry, do you think you're the Conan in this dynamic?
I just thought you'd prepare something, but you're not gonna, you're doing it your way. That's fine. Bye.
All right. Are you sure?
Yeah, I said I'm fine. So we're done. Goodbye. And definitely no song.
Okay. Well, thanks for everything. And, yeah, I guess I'll see you around. Bye.
There's a grief that can't be spoken. There's a pain goes on and on. Empty chairs and empty tables. Now my friends are dead and gone.
I'm not dead. I'm returning to a studio.
Oh, my friends, don't ask me.
Jesus Christ.
What your sacrifice was for.
This is a lot.
Empty chairs and empty tables. Where my friends.
Our household, there's just going to be very little time left to reflect by people who care to an extraordinary extent about us. We look up from the dreams and confusions of early infancy and may find a smiling face or two observing us with the utmost tenderness and concern. They watch us as a rivulet of saliva leaks slowly from the corner of our mouth and rush to wipe it away as if dabbing in a precious canvas, then indulgently stroke the fine, soft hairs on our delicate scalps. They declare us close to supernatural when at last we succeed in pulling our first smile. The applause rings for days when we take our initial steps, giggle, totter, fall, and bravely try to resume our progress. It isn't just at home. At school, the best teachers encourage us when we find something difficult. They understand we might be shy. They're keen to detect and encourage the early, tentative signs of our particular talents. Then, of course, we grow up and we're inducted into a horrific reality. We exist in a world of astonishing indifference to almost everything we are, think, say, or do. We might be in late adolescence when the point really hits home. We might be in a bedsit at university or wandering the streets of the city at night on our own, when it occurs to us with full force how negligible a thing we are in the wider scheme. No one in the crowds we pass knows anything about us. Our welfare is of no concern to them. They jostle against us on the pavements and treat us as a mere impediment to their progress. We're tiny against the towers and brightly lit flashing advertising hoardings. We might die and no one would even notice. It may be a stern truth, but we make it all the more so by focusing only on its darkest dimensions. We remain grief-stricken by how invisible we are, yet we cease to put this bracing thought to its proper philosophical purpose, that of rescuing us from another problem which is gnawing at us all the while, an ongoing and highly corrosive sense of self-consciousness. In another side of our minds, we haven't accepted the indifference of others at all. In fact, we know and suffer intensely from just how much, as we feel sure, others are thinking of us. We are extremely worried about how high-pitched and odd our voice sounded when we asked the waiter for a bit more milk. We're certain that the sales attendant noticed how out of shape our stomach is. The people in the restaurant where we're eating alone are undoubtedly spending considerable time wondering why we have no friends. At work, they're still dwelling on that slightly stupid thing we said last month about the US sales strategy. A person we went to bed with 4 years ago is to this day thinking ill of us in some powerful but undefined way. We don't really have any evidence for this, and yet it can feel like an emotional certainty. It can feel intuitively clear that our foolishness and less than impressive sides are being noted and dwelt on all the time by everyone at large. Every way in which we depart from what the world considers to be normal, upstanding, and dignified has been registered by the widest constituency. To liberate us from this kind of punitive story, we may need to conduct a deliberately artificial thought exercise. We may have to set ourselves the challenge of examining how long we spend on the foolishness or just existence of other people. How we think and feel about other people we don't particularly know is perhaps the best guide to the workings of the average human imagination, to pretty much
This is a hot holiday gift. There are several brands on the market.
they look fun.
In 2015, there was a rush of this new item.
More of a battery-powered skateboard, but nevertheless called a hoverboard.
They were just flooding Amazon. But suddenly batteries went up in flames.
It's on fire!
Fire departments were seeing this and were very concerned.
The hoverboard ignited while it was being charged and actually rolled over to a bed and ignited the bedding in the bedroom.
Amazon is removing most brands from its site.
And I started to notice this pattern. I found there were many other examples of items that were not complying with safety standards that are set by governmental bodies or were set by Amazon. They were being thrown up online and sold to the public.
More and more consumers are becoming accustomed to shopping online.
That's a low price.
With better prices, with better reliability and convenience, e-commerce is slowly every year growing in its size. Unfortunately, e-commerce is one of the main ways illicit goods can enter into circulation.
We found 52 supplements that had been identified by the FDA and the Justice Department as containing illegal prescription drugs. There were several hundred masks that were not approved by the FDA. 4,510 balloons without choking hazard warnings, and 3,644 toys without the proper warning label.
no consumer is willingly buying products which can potentially injure their child.
Hospital officials confirm they are treating her son for ingesting magnets.
Unfortunately, the refund is irrelevant if they actually had damage to them or their kids.
My name is Alexandra Berzon. I'm a reporter in the investigations group of the Wall Street Journal. When I started looking at this incredible growth in the marketplace of Amazon, I started to see the potential consumer safety issues.
A salon-grade hairdryer on Amazon, fresh out of the box.
We found thousands of products that were misrepresenting safety, saying they had certain compliance that they didn't have, claiming to be FDA approved, trying to misrepresent and tell the consumer that this item is safe when it's not. So I ordered this. It's a baby sleep positioner. The FDA has said that these are not safe because it can cause suffocation. Every so often, I'll go and look for the sleep positioner. And without fail, within 30 seconds, I will always find it. Let's see, there it is. Yeah, it's the second non-sponsored one. Here's another one. So we've seen what now? At least 4, it's even more this time. 8, 11. Yeah, we've already found a whole bunch. A lot more than I had seen, like when I looked at this last time. It looks like the baby from the box that I had ordered. This is the one that the person is selling on Amazon. This is Amazon's own picture of what not to sell on Amazon. It used to be that you would walk into a store and you understood that this store had assembled the products for you. You know, they might have a few suppliers and they have a pretty good idea of who those suppliers are. They also have a legal liability for the integrity of those products.
eBay is fast and easy.
Marketplaces online really changed that model.
Walmart, Etsy, Wish, Alibaba, Target, and other marketplaces.
With Amazon being the leading one. Amazon, when they started, was selling products directly, and they built up a lot of trust through that. Then at some point they decided, well, you know what, we could take that trust and we could actually extend it to a whole bunch of other people who are third-party sellers.
Any business from anywhere can go into Amazon and create a seller account. 60% or more of their sales globally are actually coming from those third-party sellers. The things you're buying, no one has actually handpicked to be sold to you. Everything is automated, and it's also probably coming from a foreign country far, far away.
E-commerce is great, just like a market with different stands, with different vendors. But it's also becoming increasingly misused or abused by criminals. They don't care about the norms, they don't care about rules, regulations. What they look for is money. So any opportunity that arises is immediately exploited by them.
Most retailers, they enforce quality checks, and they can often physically inspect products by sending their staff to the actual factories. The open marketplace model Amazon is running prevents Amazon from enforcing the same checks and balances in place because it's not a thing you can do for millions of individual third-party sellers.
Here's another one. After we sent Amazon a list of every product that we found, they did take many of them down. And then again, we would find that this problem would just kind of pop back up. People are attempting to get through their barriers and get to consumers.
A Tennessee family is suing Amazon for $30 million for negligence after a hoverboard caused a fire that destroyed their home.
What happens if something goes wrong? What protections do you then have? We found one case where someone had died in a motorcycle accident. And the motorcycle company said that it was certified by the Department of Transportation, and it turns out it wasn't. The family wanted somebody to be responsible for that. Amazon argues that it's not liable for the products that it sells by third-party sellers. So Amazon is providing the platform payment processing. The item is stored at the Amazon warehouse, and then Amazon is shipping it in an Amazon box. But Amazon says at no point in that process are we the actual seller of the item. We are just the platform. The company that actually sold the helmet through Amazon was just this one man who basically didn't have enough money to pay for lawyers, and they got a judgment of I think over $1 million. But like, how are they going to collect that? Amazon actually did agree to pay without admitting any guilt or anything. They paid $5,000. There's a whole regulatory structure, legal structure in the US that's based on the idea of stores selling items. With marketplaces online, this liability is still being worked out. I think consumers have shown that they really like online marketplaces, but consumers could become more aware of what they're buying and where it's coming from.
Of course, at the end of the day, we have lots of products that are cheap. But for criminals, it means lots of opportunities for infiltration and for profits.
The bad actors will always find ways to evolve, and it's a never-ending battle trying to limit them.
So I spend a lot of time looking at houses on Zillow. And lately I noticed that even in places where houses are usually expensive, they seem even more expensive. Like here in the San Francisco Bay Area. What has the last year been like?
It's shocking. Buyers are paying 15 to 20% above asking price now. I had a listing in South San Francisco, 32 offers, 31 very unhappy buyers.
For years, the Bay Area has been an extreme example of how difficult it is to find affordable housing in the U.S. It's where Silicon Valley bus drivers sleep in their cars at night because they can't afford housing near work, and where school teachers can't afford to live in the counties they teach. But it's not just the Bay Area. The lack of affordable housing is a national problem, and right now it's worse than ever.
We've seen over the last year housing prices reach a level that they've never reached before in American history. They kind of just look like a rocket ship, going to the moon. Housing prices reaching a median of $350,000 for the median American home.
Those prices have made rents more expensive and have made homeownership less attainable for millions of Americans. So, why is this happening? And how do we bring that rocket ship closer to Earth? We can think of today's housing prices in terms of a supply and demand problem. On the demand side, there are a few things happening. The first is a generational shift in who's buying homes.
Millennials are the biggest generation in American history, and they're aging into their prime home buying years.
On top of that, mortgage rates are at an all-time low, which means it's very cheap to borrow the money needed to buy a house. That's enticed more people to buy if they can, making demand for houses even higher. The problem is that supply isn't matching that demand. From 2010 to 2019, there were fewer homes built in the U.S. than in any decade since the 1960s. In particular, the construction of smaller, entry-level housing, the kind made for first-time homebuyers, has dropped dramatically. In the 1980s, those starter homes made up around 40% of all homes built. Today, it's closer to 7%. In 2018, one estimate said the U.S. housing market was 2.5 million homes short of meeting demand. By the end of 2020, it was 3.8 million.
And that's driving a big part of the problem, both for renters and for people who want to be homeowners.
The shortage is worst in the places where demand is highest, near good jobs, transit, and schools. And one pretty straightforward solution to that is to just build more homes in those places. But for years, there's been one big obstacle to that. We aren't allowed to. Take a look at this map of the Bay Area. It's showing something called zoning, or local regulations that decide what can be built where. This much of the region is zoned for residential housing. In blue are areas zoned to allow multifamily housing, while the areas shaded in pink are zoned for single-family housing only. That's 82% of all residential land in the Bay Area.
What it means is that you've banned the ability for anyone to build anything other than a single unit of housing on that lot of land.
And in many towns, like Atherton, they've excluded all multifamily housing from their neighborhoods.
And that doesn't just mean a giant apartment building. It means things like duplexes, things like, fourplexes, things like that are illegal in the majority of the country.
This is an example of something called exclusionary zoning. It's a big part of the reason for the housing supply shortage in the US. And single-family only zoning is just one way local laws limit how much housing we can build. Many places also employ height restrictions. In Cupertino, California, some areas are zoned for multifamily buildings, but they don't allow any buildings over 2 stories. Parking requirements are often written into zoning laws too. Cupertino requires developers to set aside space for 2 parking spaces for each unit of multifamily housing. That means if you were building an apartment complex that had 100 units, you need to find space for 200 parking spots, which usually means buildings that size don't get built at all.
They lower the number of units they're actually building so they can save space for those parking spaces. And then those units become more expensive because the land still stays the same cost to the developer. And you then get a situation where potentially more affordable units turn into higher income servicing units.
Another feature of many zoning laws is minimum lot sizes. It means builders are legally required to allot a minimum amount of land for each home, often a large amount of land. In Cupertino, most single-family lots must be at least 5,000 square feet each.
Starter homes are usually around 1,400 to 1,500 square feet, and so you've basically banned all that type of housing.
In Atherton, the minimum lot size for homes is 1 acre, more than 43,000 square feet, which makes it virtually impossible to build any kind of affordable home there. Together, exclusionary zoning laws like this push builders across the country to focus on bigger luxury homes instead of smaller starter homes or multifamily housing.
Essentially creating gated communities in public spaces. What you are saying is that you are only allowing people who have already been able to partake in the wealth of this country and to grow their income and have access to high opportunity jobs and education to live in our neighborhoods.
Historically, some of the first zoning laws in the US were engineered for that exactly, to block people of color and, in particular, Black Americans from living in predominantly white neighborhoods. Today, the laws don't explicitly mention race, but they continue to worsen segregation. In the Bay Area, the more single-family zoning in a neighborhood, the wider it is. But all this has another effect as well. By shrinking the pot of new housing getting built, while demand keeps rising, it drives up the cost of housing for everyone. Changing zoning laws can be difficult, and often the biggest obstacles are the wealthiest residents.
The process is usually defined by who shows up to these public meetings. And what you have is often a much whiter, wealthier crowd, the ones who come and say, I don't want this in my community. I'm concerned about what will happen to my property values. And then there's this kind of code word, neighborhood character.
Remember those teachers I mentioned who can't afford to live in the counties where they teach? Well, in 2018, one local school district proposed a solution, building affordable housing units for teachers in San Jose. It caused an uproar among San Jose parents, who petitioned against changing the neighborhood. It may not seem like a big deal when one wealthy neighborhood blocks one multifamily development. The problem is that it happens all the time. Communities block everywhere.
People are, when they hear this kind of rhetoric, very confused because they're like, why I don't want to live in a place with 10,000 apartment buildings. It doesn't even make sense to do that. And they're right. No one is saying that there should be every neighborhood in every city should be, 10,000 foot apartment buildings or anything like that.
But even small, gradual changes to zoning laws can have an impact. For example, allowing smaller homes on smaller lots, or simply allowing duplexes, would double capacity for housing in some areas. In recent years, some cities like Berkeley, Minneapolis, and Portland have taken the huge step of ending single-family zoning. But the problem is nationwide.
The real fix is going to happen when these decisions start being made and start being regulated at the statewide level or at the federal level in some capacity.
Today, the Biden administration is attempting to tackle exclusionary zoning through a $5 billion program that would give money to localities that remove exclusionary zoning policies. But even that may not be enough.
This is more than any presidential administration has done on this topic, either Democrat or Republican. It is also very small in the face of this problem. They want to take action, they recognize how big of a deal it is, but they are not actually willing to create the kind of political blowback from often very high-value voters living in suburban environments.
Ending America's housing shortage will require real political willpower. And it'll require people across the country to take a look at their own neighborhoods. What gets built, who gets excluded, and how to make homeownership achievable for the millions who are shut out.
These images of a swarm of locusts are from the BBC's groundbreaking Planet Earth series in 2006. And this footage comes from the brand new sequel to that program. This is Planet Earth 2. You might notice the improvement in resolution from HD to Ultra HD. But another big change is that in Planet Earth 2, it's not just the grasshoppers that are moving. The cameras are moving too. These dynamic tracking shots are part of the reason why Planet Earth 2 is the BBC's most cinematic wildlife film yet.
We know when we go to the cinema now, the camera is never static. It's always on the move, it's always on a steady camera, it's always on tracks, it's always flying. And I think we wanted to reflect that in our approach. And not just because we wanted to homage to cinema, but because the reason why cinema does that is because as soon as you have that sense of moving camera, it feels more immersive, it feels more connected.
Watching Planet Earth 2 feels a bit like watching a Hollywood blockbuster. You almost forget that these actors are hiding in remote corners of the globe, and they do not follow scripts. The BBC's Natural History Unit in Bristol has been producing wildlife films for 60 years. Their frequent presenter, Sir David Attenborough, is the most recognizable voice of the genre.
This extraordinary creature is half blind, half deaf, and this is just about as fast as it can move.
And through the decades, they've continually raised the bar for the look and feel of nature films too. That evolution, as we'll explore in this 3-part series, is in large part a story of technology. The first big breakthrough was lightweight 16mm film cameras.
If you remember, television began as a studio operation. It just had ginormous, video cameras that were, larger than a person. And then in the film industry, of course, that was all movies. And again, very, very cumbersome. So there simply weren't cameras that you could take into the jungles and deserts and so on.
16mm cameras were portable, but they were controversial inside the BBC, seen as amateur cameras since 35mm film was the broadcast standard at the time. But Attenborough insisted on the smaller cameras for his first trips overseas, and sure enough, he came back with footage of animals that had never before been filmed, like these Indri lemurs in Madagascar. 56 years later, filming the Indri means moving the camera around them and traveling with them through the trees. But the technology they used to do this has only come around in the past few years. The issue is stabilization. You can see the shaking in these rare handheld shots from the BBC's 1990 series, The Trials of Life. Aerial shots had the same problem, and if they tried to zoom in, those bumps just got magnified. Producers could achieve cinematic motion with cranes, dollies, and sliders where it was practical to do so. But for decades, almost all of the shots that weren't underwater involved a camera on a tripod, panning, tilting, and zooming to follow the action. There's definitely no shortage of incredible animal behavior to film that way, But it all changed around 2002. That's when the BBC switched from film to digital HD cameras for the Planet Earth series. That switch gave them access to a tool called the Cineflex Heli Gimbal. It's a stabilization system for a helicopter-mounted camera. The Heli Gimbal delivered the smooth, sweeping, scenic shots that define the epic look of that series. But it also let them film individual animals from a kilometer up in the sky and zoom way in to follow them without the noise of the chopper scaring them off. And that changed the way that they could capture behaviors like hunting.
If you look at how people shot and edited hunting sequences, because of the nature of where you had to put the camera, you could never get long, continuous shots. Because you'd get a shot on a tripod, the wolf would run up, you'd jump up, get the Land Rover, run across, put the tripod down, get another shot. So it always had to be quite edited and quite constructed.
Compare that to the wolf hunt in Planet Earth.
Once that wolf started hunting, you could just fly along, keeping your distance, and in one shot, you could just see how that drama played out, and you just do not know what's going to happen. Is it going to stumble? Is it going to catch it? Is the little caribou going to run away? Is it going to stumble? It was so gripping because it was unmediated.
The Cineflex system required digital cameras because it separates the lens from the camera's data storage, which at the time was digital video cassette tape. You just can't do that with film. The 400mm zoom lens is mounted inside a series of rings called a gimbal that isolate it from the movement of the helicopter with the help of small sensors called gyroscopes. Those sensors detect changes in orientation so that motors can correct for those